going to go ahead and get this meeting started. Welcome to the Warren County our public meeting. This is a work session. I think it's really important to know that we developed more routine and regular work sessions because we wanted to open up the flow of communication. I can't really know what the other supervisors are thinking. I can't go talk to them. So the work sessions were designed so the supervisors could give their opinions and discuss things. So we do that out in public, and we want public input for this meeting. So can we get roll call, please?
McIntyre? Here. Snell?
Here.
Heater?
Here. So we do have a quorum, and the first item on our meeting today is a dispatch restructure discussion. And I'll ask Doug Eichholz to kind of kick this off.
Okay. For several months now, different parties have had conversations about the future of dispatch. Does it stay in the sheriff's office as it currently is, or does it move to a new entity? This is not a new conversation. This has been going on for several years, actually. But lately, there's been a stronger discussion about it moving from underneath the sheriff's office to its own entity. Several of us have had Zoom calls. We've had a Zoom call with Boone County. Boone County has a independent entity made up of Boone the county, Boone the city, Madrid, and Ogden. We've looked at that as a example to follow. We've looked at different pieces of Westcom and how that was formed and how they currently do their business. Gone through several 28Es related to Westcom and how they fund themselves. So I think we're at a point now where the Board of Supervisors needs to kind of weigh in, lead some discussion about this. Several of the different entities are here today to participate in that discussion. I believe it was a week and a half ago we had a conversation between the city managers of Carlisle and Indianola, the police chiefs from those entities, the fire chiefs from those entities, the mayor of Indianola, the sheriff, myself, and Supervisor Heater to have a preliminary discussion about whether this is something that those three entities wanted to explore. I think the conversation was very positive toward that, and the decision was made to bring this to the supervisors and, like I said before, let you guys give some direction and figure out if this is where you want to go. So I yesterday sent out a 28E that I previously prepared just to get the conversation rolling. I will admit a lot of it comes from the 28E that made up the Boone County one. I've had discussions with all three supervisors and listened to what you all have had to say, and I've tried to incorporate several of those things into this revised agreement that I sent out to you yesterday. I'll leave it there.
Could you put it in context as to how things are structured presently, and then relate that to any future as to where I think that'd be helpful to just understand a little bit better. And also the role of the supervisors in that discussion and authority.
So right now I would classify it as a division underneath the sheriff's office. So just as the sheriff has patrol, he has his civil division, he has his jail division. He also has dispatch underneath him. Up until Friday, we had a communications director being Tom Landy. Tom left to take a job with the federal government. So now we're without. So one of the first things that needs to be decided is who's going to be that person. So on Friday, the sheriff posted for that position. A part of our discussion with the community members the other day was that we understand that this will not be a decision that's made within the next 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's going to take a little bit of time to hash out all the parameters of what a different entity could potentially look like. But to that end, because this position is so important, the sheriff has agreed to open this up and form different forums, and the different groups will all interview the candidates, and they will make a decision as to who the director should be. There'll be all the players that were at our meeting a week and a half ago or so will all participate in the selection of the new director. So that's a positive, and that's a change from the past, the way we've done things. With regard to how dispatch is budgeted, it's budgeted under the sheriff's office, since it is a division under him. The city of Indianola pays approximately $80,000 a year toward dispatch. Carlisle is set to pay, I believe, in the range of $25,000 a year for dispatch services. Warren County picks up the remainder, which is 1.5-ish.
I've got our total budget for this year under the 1040 line items, which is my dispatch section, is 1.165.
Okay. Is that supplemented with any other?
It's not per se supplemented. There are some funds that come in occasionally for certain things as they pop up from the 911 board that aren't figured into this, but this is what the board allotted for fiscal year 24. The previous year was 1.231.
How does tower maintenance fit into that?
Tower maintenance is included in this.
In the
which,
1.6?
Yes, which this year is budgeted for 265.
About insurance for dispatch for all the employees. Does that
So-
come out of supplemental?
Payroll, yes, part of that will come out of that. These are just, I guess, the operations. These are the wages, the running of the center, yeah. So insurance would come out of the O2, yeah.
Do we
I didn't
have-
factor that in.
Okay, do we have any dispatch who are on, that come off of the rural fund?
Presently, no.
Okay.
So it's all off of the 1040 line.
Since you addressed the rural fund, I'll address it just briefly. In the Boone County model, Boone County pays the lion's share of the cost. The city of Boone pays, Madrid pays, Ogden pays. They do also take a portion from the rural fund. It's a very small piece, but there is a piece that's paid for out of the rural fund. So I think part of what comes into this is how is this going to be funded if it is a separate entity? You know, there are different thoughts. It's based on population, calls for service. There's a whole variety of different ways that it could be funded, and that's a discussion for all the entities to discuss if this moves forward from there. There's not one specific way that it could be paid for. There's multiples.
Who does the Board of Supervisors retain ownership of the communication system?
My proposal would be that the board does retain ownership of the hardware, because we've made a significant investment into this already. And the board, or the county, has the responsibility to pay those bonds back. My recommendation would be that it gets leased to the entity for a nominal fee, and if at some point they decide to disband and go separate ways, then the county still retains its ownership in the equipment. So the consoles that are already in the dispatch center, those would be retained by the county. The towers, all of those pieces would stay with us, because we have made this significant investment in this at this point in time. What I think would have to be decided is what happens as you move forward with the equipment that needs to be replaced. Is that something that the members pay for? Is that something that the county is responsible for? So that's another discussion that will need to take place. But initially, what I would recommend is that we retain ownership of what we paid for it to this point.
As far as like Indianola paying 80,000 and Carlisle the 25, in moving to this model, I don't see the point if all of their citizens are already paying taxes to the general fund for their salaries, as well as a supplemental for their insurance, and as well as paying for the debt service levy for the initial. So I just feel that it's a double taxing if your entities are paying a separate fee. So, but that's just my opinion after knowing and understanding this project.
It's a fair discussion that will need to take place. I agree.
You mean the people from Indianola and Carlisle are getting double taxed because they're paying a fee and?
Yes.
Well, there's another way to look at that too, and that is that those entities, Norwalk specifically, that's in Westcom, still helping pay for this system, even though they're not participating in it
Absolutely.
from a taxation standpoint. So there's that argument for that large chunk of the county as well.
But you guys are getting a totally different service.
We are,
Whereas
but we're
this-
paying for this one too.
Exactly.
Well, your points are the same then, you're
Yeah.
both getting
Yeah.
overtaxed, correct?
Exactly.
I mean, I think you guys agree that, I mean, and I'm not gonna agree, but I think that dispatch we need to be looking at the funding of dispatch, like how are we gonna pay for this over the years? Because if we just continue to take this off the general fund, at some point, the costs are gonna outweigh our ability to balance our budget. And so, I mean, are the citizens double taxed? I don't know, because in my opinion, the level of service is potentially higher in Carlisle because we have full-time fire departments and we have
Yeah.
a bit larger police, law enforcement.
Right.
So that level of service in those communities, I think, is higher. And I think if you were to ask the residents, I'm willing to pay for that to keep my level of service high.
Well, and I think that the investment that the county has made, frankly, we have built a very functional dispatch system now, probably underutilized in terms of how we use it. Its capabilities are much greater than what we're actually utilizing it for at this point. And I think from that standpoint, when you look at the Norwalks of the world, who may not be directly part of the dispatch, there's still potentially a great benefit for Norwalk because they have an investment in the potential use of the system that's there. And the towers that were put in place were very much a needed aspect of the development. Obviously, now we've got that in place, so okay, going forward, how do we utilize that to the best of its ability that benefits, the original mission and purpose of why we even went this direction in the first place. So I don't think, Darren, from that perspective, I don't think that Norwalk is necessarily disappointed with what's happened. I think it's just something we have to recognize, that there are additional participants that maybe not getting the primary dispatch use out of it, but that doesn't mean that there isn't value for them in the infrastructure that's there.
I'm not a tax guru, but so all three of you could correct me if I'm wrong, but what the rural people pay with regard to county-only taxes is different than what the incorporated people in Carlisle and Indianola pay
Correct.
The
as a
rural pay
tax
more.
rate. Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Into the county.
so I think you can look at that as, yes, they're already taxed and they pay a portion to the county, but they're not paying at the same rate as the rural people are paying. So that, I'm not trying to say, yes, they should pay, no, they shouldn't pay, but that is a consideration that I think. the county
There's
should
just
take.
no contract in place right now with Indianola or with Carlisle. It's just a gentleman's agreement, which if we are counting on that money, that's not appropriate. As well as, I don't see any benefit to an extra 80 or 25,000 when it's already $1,006,500. I mean, it just, I don't know.
It's like pennies on the dollar for
Yeah,
what the
it
actual
doesn't-
costs are.
I mean, it may be something to your city budgets, but I don't know. It feels like you're paying to be a part of this committee, and that doesn't feel right. It's just,
I'm not understanding what you're saying.
it feels like the city of Indianola and the city of Carlisle are paying to be a member of the committee, because no one else is getting a seat as important except the county. So, just a perception.
Can I disagree with you,
Yeah.
Crystal?
Absolutely.
This 80,000, I've worked for Indianola for 29 years. Back in the day,
Yeah.
that 80,000 really meant something because
Right.
there were
It
only
went to
a
a
few
dispatch.
dispatchers and the system, it was a box and a microphone and
Yeah.
they hand wrote everything. So that 80,000 really did have an impact on the budget of dispatch. So I look at it as a little bit different because we've been paying this all along. I don't feel like we're paying to have a vote or anything like that. We've been in this for forever. Like you said, there is no agreement. I tried to find one. I'm sure it was a handshake between Jim Lee and 14 chiefs ago in
Right.
my department, and that's what it's been.
Exactly.
Thank you.
I mean, I think where this conversation needs to go is, what are the benefits of doing this? What are the benefits, I mean, how are we gonna improve the quality of life for Warren County residents by doing this? I mean, ultimately, that's what this comes down to. And what I like about the restructure or potential restructure and forming a new board, I like the idea that people pay to have a seat at the table to set policy. And I think it's important, because we always get bogged down in, certain people don't have input into how dispatch is ran in Warren County, and that couldn't be further from the truth. I mean, Lampy and Joe have fielded calls from everybody, and they don't differentiate between city and rural or voluntary and full-time. I mean, they went 110% after trying to solve problems for everybody in dispatch regardless. But there's a big difference between having input and setting policy. And I think in order to set policy and set structure, and what is the vision for this in 5 years, that takes, I think the structure should be kind of a pay to play in a policy, in the policy and strategy of what the communications division is going to be. I like that. I think that's an important element, because that allows Norwalk to come back in at some point, and there will be a formula, and it'll be a pretty simple formula. I think Boone County does per capita. I like that. It's easy to calculate, and it's easy to have that metric that everybody knows how it works.
Westcom does something similar to that too.
And Westcom does something similar to that. And so if the question is, are we going to have cities pay for dispatch services? That's a question we need to answer. I like that. I think that's a good thing.
So would it just be cities?
It could be a group of towns. One of the discussions was, we're going to have a 3-member board to start and potentially get to a 5-member board based on this pay-to-play concept. So, Indianola would have a place, and Carlisle would have a place. And I think your fees may be recalculated when we start looking at what percentage of overall cost do we want the cities to participate in? We haven't done any of those calculations or created any of those scenarios, but 80,000, like Brian said, what 80,000 was 25 years ago isn't what 80,000 is today. So we got to find the sweet spot on the metric and on the formula for these cities. But I could see a scenario where Hartford and Milo and Martinsdale and 4 or 5 towns come together and they pay a fee and they have a representative on the board.
Darren, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Under the pay-to-play model then, would those players, if you will, be responsible for capital improvement?
I don't think so. I don't think they'll be responsible. I think ultimately the county will be responsible for equipment, capital improvements, and that'll be that'll be a discussion. Whoever the board of supervisor is that's on this new committee, it's going to be incumbent on that board of supervisor to be communicating with the rest of the board of supervisors on what this budget looks like, what the improvements are that are needed. And we need to be talking about that 2 years out, 3 years out, 4 years out, and planning for that. So, but I don't believe that we're going to get all our towns and cities to even penetrate a significant percentage of our overall cost. The county's going to have to carry that burden to make sure, so we can grow like we want to grow. So when we need more dispatchers, we need more training, that those resources are there, they're in place, and we're moving our, what we're trying to do is move dispatch to even the next level. We've seen a lot of improvement the last couple of years. We need to keep the momentum going. I think hiring the right talent for this position is critical, and I like the panel idea because we want our different entities within our county to have input on that, and that's the way the best decision will be made. This isn't going to be the board of supervisors making the decision on leadership. This is going to be all of us in this room. So,
Can I give you some other benefits? So obviously right now, it's underneath the sheriff. Sheriff's an elected position. So I think Joe's done a good job with dispatch, moving it forward. That's not to say Joe's going to be there forever. What if the next person comes in and doesn't have an eye toward dispatch? So moving into its own entity creates stability because the people that are paying the bill are going to be the ones that set the policy. They're going to be the ones that have the greatest interest in the success of dispatch. And that level of service should stay there and not be subject to the whims of whoever's the sheriff at that time, what they see as important.
The way I've always seen it was irregardless of who was actually sheriff. It was, because the sheriff could have ultimately all kinds of ideas for dispatch, but if the board of supervisors won't give him budget or won't agree to increase his personnel, the sheriff is pretty much left helpless. And to me, that's the bigger issue with having it underneath the sheriff, is those limitations that the board of supervisors. Luckily, he's had a board that has been very supportive of dispatch and communication, but it hasn't always been the case in Warren County. For 20 years, they could not increase in staffing, nor in training, nor in any other position. So that to me is paramount of why this should move.
So to dovetail what you just said there, let's say that this new entity puts a high value in training. That's their philosophy. Then the 3 or 5 or however many are on the board of directors say, you know what, we value training, so we are going to allocate X number of dollars to training. Whereas maybe somebody else who's in charge doesn't have that same philosophy, toward training. But if the 3, 5, however many say, you know what, we do value this, we're going to fund it, we're going to put our money where our philosophy is, then they do that. And since that group, the board of directors is over the director of communications, they get to say as a group, this is what we want you to focus on. If it's, we want you to do this, that, or the other thing, then they do.
Right.
Whereas right now, you as the board can say to the sheriff, we want you to do more training. Okay, and we're gonna allocate $500,000 to training. It's still his decision whether he spends it or not. Okay? You can give him all the money in the world, but he doesn't have to spend it if that's not a priority of his. Okay? And I'm not saying it's not, so don't take it that way. But that's the reality, because he's an elected, he gets to run his office the way he wants to run his office. If it's moved out to its own entity, then the group decides what's the priority.
And then where do the users come in?
I think the users come in.
The discussion,
Oh, okay.
I can tell you, just because we talked about that, like in Boone County, the communications director, whoever that becomes, is sitting down with the users regularly. And that's the differentiator between input and setting policy. So they get to come in and say, listen, TAC 10 is not working well for us. There's some issues with getting the call and getting out to we need better communication. We need a more of an alert. That's always going to be crucial to increasing the power of our communications division. Having that input from users is never going to go away. That's not the intent of what we're trying to do with this restructure. Like in Boone County, they have coffee every Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. And anybody that wants to come into the coffee shop and sit down with the communications director does. There's just going to have to be, and that's why I'd like the Board of Supervisors to say, and we're going to be involved, the Board of Supervisors, whether it's you or me or Mark, or whoever sits on that, and we're hearing from Brian Shear that he doesn't like, he's got some problems with dispatch. Well, the Board of Supervisors is always going to have that conduit to come back and say, no, your committee is responsible for making sure our users are happy, so there will be some input, like that's how I see it, like input from the Board of Supervisors if the level of service happens to slip, or we have Tony Beck or anybody in Warren County that's got an issue with that will be heard. That's always been with Lampy. That's worked out well. Lampy would take all those calls, and then he would go do something about it, and he could track, and that's going to be up to the director. The main initiative for the new director is to make sure our users like our system, that we're efficient, that we're doing the best we can. I think that'll be driven into the model if we get the right talent.
The next step from that is if a user has a discussion with the director and they don't like the answer that they get, then they have a right to appeal it to the board of directors themselves and ask the board to make a decision, on whatever their request was. It's no different than the way Lindsay comes to you from the Board of Zoning and makes a recommendation to you, the way she does it with the Board of Adjustment. They make recommendations and Lindsay comes and conveys those to you, and then you make a decision with regard to what happens. That is the way that I would see this working with regard to from users to director to the Board of Directors.
Can I ask two questions?
Sure.
One, do you consider users to be all of the users in the county or just the paying users?
All the users, absolutely 100%, unequivocally, all the users.
Okay, thank you. And then the second question is once you determine what the formula is for the pay-to-play model, would all of the users hypothetically have an option to buy into that? Do we have to
At a
cap the
certain
number
level,
of
I think we'd have to set a minimum. And the way, these are just, for example, let's say that there's 15,000 people in the town of Indianola, and Indianola says, hey, I want a seat on the board. we decide that the fact that would take the population times, and this is just a number I've worked out in my head that is not real, but you take it times 10, and you say that's $150,000 a year fee.
So that's where you're coming back to the concept that the smaller cities could kind of pool together and
Pool
make
to-
that minimum.
To make that, and maybe we make it a minimum of 5,000 people, so you gotta get to, you gotta meet a threshold in population to get there. And the beauty of a system like that is then we start building this PSAP out to do what we originally, the big argument when I got here was, we're gonna build our PSAP out. We're gonna go to Madison County, or wherever we're gonna go, and we're gonna figure out, well, if we have this formula in place, we know exactly what to present to them. We can start growing our PSAP under, a formula that works for everybody and is consistent across the board. Where, it isn't, why does Carlisle pay $25,000? Why does Indianola pay $80,000? We don't know. Just like everybody said, it's a gentleman's agreement. With agreements like that, this isn't going to grow. You're not going. We got to absolutely set these numbers, policies, and formulas in place, and that's what I like about this, because then everybody knows exactly how it works for everybody that may or may not become a user. It's going to be powerful to do it that way, and you can start having those discussions about how we grow our PSAP if that's what we decide we want to do. So, to me, we've got to put some of these elements either into our current system, or we have to change the system entirely.
I got a question.
Sure.
So you're doing it by agency or whatever, so then if you're coming up with that formula, is the sheriff's office gonna have to pay out of that formula? Or is the contract communities included in that, so then they're part of that seat at the table? And then the second would be, what about the townships? And I'm representing Jackson Township as the fire chief.
Okay.
We collect the taxes for fire protection, and that's capped at 60 3/4. That is my entire operating budget, is 60 3/4 cents. And it's supplemented with dances and fundraisers. So where does that, because you're saying you would charge a city. Northern Warren is a benefited fire district. How are you coming up with a formula for those, for the townships? Because every township has a contract with a fire agency. White Oak Township's paying different than what the city of Indianola is paying as citizens. They're capped at 60 3/4. So how did the rural township come into that when you can't get blood out of turnip? And that's just a concern I have.
That's a concern regardless of what dispatch structure looks like, correct?
Well, on a pay-to-play system, I don't even have a chance to come into a
But
pay-to-play system.
you get input and you get the service. It's not a bad deal. You get the service, you could have input with the communications director, and at some point, that's where we're at today. Correct? And so
Input is a relative term. Input is a relative term.
What does that mean?
It means there's different levels of input.
right.
And I could straight out tell you that a lot of the rural communities don't feel that they've been represented. I know a community that's working on a software issue since January, they paid for it, and we're not getting anywhere.
Well, I think there's a difference between having input and having operational control. And the question is, do the townships and the rural fire departments get operational control, or they get input?
Like I say, there's different definitions on input. On whether I sit there and talk to somebody and then it doesn't change, or it doesn't, okay, yeah, you listen to me, but it doesn't go anywhere.
So you want operational control?
When you start making software decisions, that's a great question, and it's a great example. But my perspective is that we want to have consistent systems that And we've got that, you know, we've got a great communication system. I don't know, software might be, you know, I don't know, are you talking about like TAC 10 software or what?
That's what they're currently working on, is they were trying to get a connection to so they could run their reports. And they've been working with TAC 10 and Tom since January, and it hasn't gone anywhere. They're still not functional.
So so your township wants to use something different besides TAC 10?
No, I understand, it isn't my township that's doing it, it's another agency, they're trying to get a reporting software for their EMS that's tied into TAC 10, and they paid for a widget to make that happen, and it hasn't happened. And it's just things like that, I mean.
In that example, though, isn't there a third party that's involved that should have been involved from the beginning? I'm
I
just
don't know, I
saying,
don't know all the details of it, I just.
to represent that example fairly, I believe there was a third entity or a third department that should have been involved from the beginning, from what I've learned, that was not, and I think that's the holdup, is working that out. So it's not per se that they're not getting, that it's not getting addressed, it's just something that, yes, it has lingered for a few months before that was kind of brought up, if I'm thinking of the right example.
I'm sure you are.
So Darren, in your vision of this, if this example comes out, what would be the recourse for the entity?
Okay, so, I mean, on paper, the way it would work, and, you know, you can take it for what it's worth, and we've talked through this stuff. Let's just say it's your district and you have a software issue and you went to Lampe, or whoever the new Lampe is going to be, and you haven't gotten satisfaction. So then you come to this new board, as Doug had laid out earlier, and you'd make you'd come and bring your case to that board, okay? And so the board would hear you, and then the board would have to weigh, you know, how the decisions for each individual township, and this is the healthy part of this. I mean, does that align with the overall strategy of the communications department of Warren County? And it has to, Doug. Like, we have to have consistent systems, and we have to have consistent procedures, and we have to handle this stuff all the same. So your appeal would come, you know, from Lampe back, then you have every opportunity to get in front of the board, the new board, communications board, and state your case. And then they would make the ultimate decision at that point. And their whole mission and their whole thing is to build the consistency and build the systems and build the policies and build the strategy around where the communications department's going in 5 years. Because, you know, now we're kind of just all pulling against each other. These individual townships, you know, have their own mission, when really all our mission should be the same. Like, we're all going to have to agree on where this is going to go. We're going to be in open forums talking about it. We're going to be getting input. But this is all about building something that allows Warren County to increase its level of service.
Oh, 100%
And
agree.
if you're doing it one way and someone else is doing it another way, and we got 18 ways of doing the same thing, it's not efficient.
How is what is being proposed here, in your mind, better than what the emergency management was proposing 2 years ago?
When the emergency management had proposed that 2 years ago, there was some language in that 2080 agreement around an open checkbook or an unlimited amount.
But is
Or
that
EMA.
something that could have been discussed at a table?
It was discussed.
Instead of going down the whole.
It absolutely was discussed. There were proposals coming back and forth. The 2080 agreement was changed. At one point, we had modified, I think it was your 2080 or it was EMA's 2080 agreement. We had looked at that and said, hey, could you live with these changes? And it was presented, and it was, no, we can't live with those changes. So I feel like the Warren County Attorney and the Sheriff and the Board of Supervisors was doing all they could, but that risk of just opening up a checkbook and having no maximum on what dispatch was going to cost it. EMA, we're getting, what you were asking for is for EMA to have the authority to levy taxes on the residents of Warren County at their own free will, without any
But the commission consists
accountability.
of all elected officials, the mayors of all the communities.
And that's what they do now for emergency management.
But that's true. So the elected officials were coming to the Board of Supervisors saying we need an unlimited checkbook. That was a no. That was a hard no. That was a hard no from 2 out of the 3 Board of Supervisors at the time. So that, to answer your question, that's the big difference. The Board of Supervisors still has the authority to manage the overall budget, which is what their elected job is to do. And so that's a big difference. The other difference was I came in my first 2 weeks here, was presented with the 2080 agreement without a lot of knowledge and history on where we were going and what we were doing. And so that language in that 2080 agreement scared the living crap out of me. That based on this 2080 agreement that was presented to the Board of Supervisors, EMA could come call for an extra $1 million next year, and there's nothing legal or nothing in our authority to stop that from happening. It was an open checkbook, and that's the big difference.
They
We
can
don't-
do that now with the emergency management budget, and there's nothing.
Correct, right.
I'm
But
just-
that's not,
I'm
but
saying they're still
dispatch.
beholden to their citizens. It sounds like an open checkbook, but it really isn't, because they're still going to have to go back to their citizens and say, well, yeah, we just went out of control with the emergency management budget or with the communications budget, which the communications budget was always had a list of what it would be proposed, which is exactly what it has done over the last 2 years. That actually it has gone a little bit more than what emergency management has projected. But that's because you played around with the part-time, on-call, instead of going to the full-time 3 positions. But neither here nor there now.
I would say at the time, dispatch, 2 years ago when that was presented, 2.5 years ago, dispatch was a completely different entity at that time as well. I mean, there was no communications director at that time.
There was, but he was,
I mean,
how would you say, let go?
He resigned.
And so, but the point is, we were in a completely different position 2 years ago. We didn't have EMD training. We didn't have 12 dispatchers. We had 9 at the time. We didn't have a communications director. This thing has been built, and I would say that we need to applaud our leaders and our Board of Supervisors for putting the resources in place to do some of the nice things that have been done. And so, you know, we can take a snapshot from 2 years ago and say, why didn't we do something? Ultimately, we just really need to look at where we're at this point in time and what we're going to do to get to the next level. But I really stand behind with the decision we made 2 years ago because of the budget.
So I know part of the intention of this is to build out the system to include your schools, public works and that kind of stuff.
Correct.
Would those entities then be included on the umbrella of the city that they represent, or? would they
It's a
be
great
separate?
question. I don't think I mean, unless I don't think we want that all to happen, but how that's going to happen and, how the fee structures are going to work.
I think that needs to be worked out before we agree. That's
And then the
very-
school
Right.
districts also.
Yeah,
Right.
very important.
But what I would like to do, just this is my own opinion, is roll that all out as a service to the utility companies and school districts and all the entities, because there's a real power in having everybody on one communication system.
No, I 100% agree with you. I'm just questioning how they would be represented in this board, that would they still fall under the city entity or the players, the pay-to-play concept, or would they be a different?
Ben, what do you think? What do you think about that?
So for the past 8-9 years, I've been on the dispatch district of the community that I came from. It evolved from being under the sheriff's office for the exact reasons that were shared, because of volatility of the change and the desire from the entities, all the entities, to help raise the level of service. And ultimately, that was the goal. We want to raise the level of service. We wanted to make it so good that as the PSAP that was the default PSAP for the other PSAPs that were in the area, it became the agency that people would come to for consolidation, because that was a desire. Some wanted to remain independent, like Norwalk. And after years of seeing that the level of service has dramatically increased and that it was a good operational structure and the politics had diminished, that it became an inviting opportunity for the other municipalities to enter in and buy in, if you will, and ended up saving them money because right now they pay a lot of money. They paid a lot of money either to run their own or to be with a different PSAP. We couldn't expect any other entity to come in until the level of service was increased significantly for all areas, and that the representation was well done, and it represented even the rural well. And the way that was handled was the formation of a district. It evolved over time, but a formation of a district where we had a board of trustees and a technical advisory board. The technical advisory board had a member from every entity on that technical advisory board, and as issues came in, let's face it, the board of trustees, which was mostly made up of elected or city managers, didn't have the technical expertise that our respective chiefs would have. And so things were brought in, fleshed out, policies were changed, technical aspects of software reviews and whatnot were handled at this level and then brought up. But the governance at the board of trustees level basically matured because your director was not an elected official, but the accountability was held with that other board that was above. Not to say anything, because I like Joe too, and I think Joe does a great job. But it just changes the dynamic when your chief executive is not necessarily an elected leader, because you can have more accountability in the corporate structure. It was set up such that it could become a taxing entity and roll away from the county and the city budgets. Initially, it was a district under the formation of the county, but eventually other counties wanted to join in a separate county and became then a political subdivision of the state instead. So it evolved over time when there was less fear because it was being managed and run so well. Going back to how the pay was taken care of, we did it based on a combination of population and calls of service over a 3-year rolling average, so that we could not have a spike from any one year and affect municipalities' budgets. Those smaller entities that weren't at the table were represented through their county supervisor, county commissioner back there. And so that is your representative, is because they're paying the county's portion. So it's not as if you don't have a seat at the board, your seat is through the county supervisor. Generally speaking, I mean, our board did grow over time. I think we had about 17 members at one point. And the biggest issue that we ran into was getting a quorum, because things were just managed extremely well along the way. It's not to say that we didn't question things or dig deeper into certain aspects, but in order to participate, it was really easy. You could just look at the fund balance. You could divide it by the number of the population. The cost per person was this. If a new entity wanted to come in, they paid that to get in, or provided their own councils or things that they were bringing in, assets to the table. It was a very smooth process to add people in. It was near impossible to get out. If you wanted to leave, you basically said, okay, I'm leaving all my assets behind. But other than that, there was really no reason, because entities that were paying a larger amount were paying about half to 2/3 to come into this overall entity. We built our own facility, and the assets remained under the county for a time, but ultimately the assets were turned over to the district, and the district continued to provide assets. We never did take the steps to make it a taxing entity. We rather, it was mostly because we didn't want to deal with the politics of trying to raise taxes and be beat up and whatnot. It was easier for that entity to just reach out to all of the county, to the cities, and use this formula for paying. However, it was always agreed that if we were going to make that a taxing entity, on the very first year that we would raise the levy for this entity, and each of the participating entities would agree to lower the levy so that it would be a zero impact on the residents. And then any kind of increases going forward from that point forward was strictly a pitch to the residents for which we served based on the need that would have to be justified to them at the ballot box. So I was the chair of that board during the construction of the new dispatch district, and so all of this is very deja vu. All I can tell you is that there's light at the end of the tunnel, and this district was larger than Westcom, and anytime you raise the level of service, it's a benefit. Oh, and one last thing, for the larger or the smaller entities, eventually they were working towards the formation of fire districts so that they were a consolidated entity that could then have a stronger seat at the table. And in that fire district model, chiefs became battalion chiefs for their respective fire departments, and then they, increase the level of service in rural areas. So you're going down the right path.
Yeah. Well, that's-
Sorry, the question still though was, if you went on a per capita cost, so Indianola, let's just talk about it. So Indianola's paying per capita, but let's say the school system now joins. Is that already covered under that per capita rate?
We didn't have our school district in it. We provided a channel that was available to each of the municipalities in the school district for the public works and all that type of thing to be able to tie into. And as we rotated out our 900 megahertz, 800 megahertz radios from the police and the fire, 800 megahertz radios, we would give those to the public works and to the school districts. But they just never utilized it all that much, and nor did they have very many issues, only during emergency planning. And so I couldn't see that they would want to pay, and they would probably want to fall under the city aspect. They would just, it was more of a emergency management, the great shakeout type of planning, tabletop exercises that we would do because earthquakes were there as opposed to tornadoes here, and that's when we would have to kind of almost pull teeth to get the schools and the public works departments to be part of it.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but when it comes to like public works, and we would have maybe our engineering department, secondary roads, they wouldn't be using dispatch. They would just be talking amongst each other, and only in an emergency would they then. So to me, at least my perspective is that those who are going to be using dispatch on a regular basis would need to pay.
That makes sense.
Yeah, it does make sense.
They're on the system, but they're not utilizing the
That's really good
time
point.
and
That's a good
resources.
point.
They're using the trunking lines, but not the dispatch service.
Yeah, the cost is with dispatches of late, the dispatchers and the labor and the facility. If they're not using that, there really is no additional cost.
They're using cell phones today, and the thing is, it's only if the cell towers go down that they need to switch to the radios.
Just as you're looking at expanding the user group, the user base for ISICs, as the ISICs board chair, you need to make sure that they're eligible users under the FCC license for the frequencies that are being used. Sure.
They have to fill their
And
application.
that they've gone through the application process. Just, I know that's kind of a ways down the road, but not just anyone can be on the ISIC system. There has to be, you have to be eligible users for, as an interoperability user, that net is, as an operable user, it becomes fairly narrow, fairly fast, so just FYI.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay.
You're adding the maturity to the organization is what you're doing. And you're making it so that it's not necessarily dependent upon any one personality, but it's going to evolve and perpetuate over time, irrespective of elections. That's what you're really going towards, making it so that when people pick up the phone, that they a lot of times they're getting the help right over the phone that they need, as opposed to even in those who are arriving. And so people depend upon that lifeline to 911. And in our law enforcement and firefighters, EMTs, paramedics, they rely on a strong dispatch for their life safety. It's a life safety issue for them. And so it's key critical to have that element in your community. And the new dispatch compared to what I saw when I first came is beautiful. You're doing great. The consoles and work that's in the Justice Center.
Being a new member of the board, of course, this is rather new to me. So I've been learning over the last 7, 8 months here what's all involved. And, it's rather impressive to see what has been developed and what is evolving as going. So it seems to me, as we're doing this conversation, it seems like this is a logical next step to continue to evolve as we go forward. One of the great concerns I have, and it's one that just eats into me every day, is not so much the dispatch, but what happens after dispatch or the lack thereof here in the county. That is my great heartburn, because we're not able, we can hear every day, we know where the problem is, but to get what's needed to solve the problem, we have significant portions of the county that it's not happening. We're not happening in a timely manner. That just eats away at me every day just thinking about that.
Are you talking about the response?
The response.
Okay.
That's not what we're
Okay,
talking about
that's
today,
right.
but this is,
I'm like-
this leads up to that. So I mean, the dispatch is great. We can call out to the wherever and say, hey, so-and-so needs an ambulance at their house. But on the other end, they can't deliver. And to me, that is the ultimate. When we get to that point where we can start to address that problem as well as dealing with the dispatch, then we've really arrived. So to me, this is just a lot. I bring that up because to me, it seems like we're walking in a path, in a good direction, and it is a natural evolution to move forward and update and upgrade our ability to do everything. And this is just part of that process. So I'm liking what I'm hearing. It makes sense to me that this is what we should be doing.
I think another concern that I have is, which maybe this is part of the progression, but in your model, who handled radios? Did you have one radio tech? Each jurisdiction was responsible?
The state actually, they had what was called UCAN, that took care of radio towers statewide. And
Oh, I'm talking about the actual radios.
right,
the
and they
physical.
would give grants to the different agencies that
So
would
it's set up
assist in radios and all that.
They had state assistants on that.
We
That's not fair.
didn't, so all 911 dollars weren't handled this way. All 911 dollars went to the state. Per capita went to the different entities. Every entity that participated automatically turned their 911 dollars to dispatch. Dispatch used 911 dollars because they're restricted. You use the most restricted dollars for whatever restricted purchases you make. Supplement that with the city budgets and everything else coming in.
Okay.
But the tower system was provided by the state.
Whereas we bought the towers, we own the towers.
Right.
And
Right.
we own the radios.
We own the, yeah.
Yep.
But
I do think
It
that
goes
that's
to
an issue
some-
that's come up, and I've been questions about that. And, thoughts have been shared with me specifically about the radios, because it would appear as though there needs to be a little skin in the game, so to speak, for all the entities, and to just, for the county to willy-nilly just give out radios. It's not agreed that that's the best way to do it.
And they didn't at the state either. They didn't just give out radios. It was a matching type of a situation where the entities had to pay for a significant portion, and the state supplemented it as well.
Just Darren, what you said wasn't exactly correct. Indianola Police Department owns all of its radios.
Okay.
All of it.
Okay.
Fire department.
So does
Some-
Crown Police and Fire.
Yeah, okay, so we don't own the radios.
You own
Did we buy a bunch of radios
Not
at
ours.
one time?
You bought the radios, but then they were given to the agencies and became the agency's responsibility once they took ownership over, once the system was approved.
And the expectation to replace.
And it's their, I guess, the expectation that the agencies replace their own radios.
Okay, so please dive into this a little more. Do you still have
Okay.
concerns about radios?
I do.
Okay.
Just because of how they're set up because it's a countywide system. And I know, forgive me, I'm not a user, so I don't understand this correctly, but when there's an incident and it becomes more involved, where more agencies come, you don't want to be fumbling around figuring out what channel everybody's on, but if everybody is set up correctly, then you can go to, the incident commander will say it's on channel 1 and y'all go to 1. That's very paramount to me in how the radios are maintained going forward. They should still be part of the jurisdictions. It's just, are the maintenance being followed up on the radios? I wouldn't want something that happened. I know a couple years ago, before the system was in place, where people were looking at each other and they could not communicate on their radio, and it was a radio problem. So I really...
The lady had a gun.
Yeah, and I want everybody to go home at night, and I want our citizens to be protected, and I think it starts at radios.
Crystal, can I address
Yes.
that for a
Yeah.
second? So I think that goes back to a policy set up by the board
Yes.
of directors. And I think you and I had this conversation maybe, or maybe it was Mark, I can't remember. But with regard to the radios, if the board of directors of the new entity says every 6 months we want someone associated with the entity itself to go around and check all the radios and make sure that they're still working correctly, then that is a policy and philosophy
Right.
of that board of directors, and they do that. It could be where the entity you have the director, and then you have an assistant director, and part of that person's job is to program radios, check radios, and make sure that everybody, because I agree, everybody who's on the system needs to make sure that they're on the system and it hasn't been messed up. And I think that's how you can get into that and have somebody who's responsible. So one of their responsibilities is doing that.
Is that something that can be spelled out in the 28E and not just an expected policy down the road? Because to me, this is part of the system. And this governing body is going to be ultimately responsible for that. And I think spelling that out right in the beginning, that this is our expectation as a citizenry, as a board of supervisors who owns the system, we expect this expectation.
I think all of those things that, the board holds near and dear to its heart like that are things that you can put into its policies as to, we want, we expect to have 3 dispatchers. We want to have E&D dispatching. We want to have a person who programs radios contained in the entity itself. We want to have those radios checked on a twice-a-year basis. All of those kind of things are things that group can say, these are important to us, and we're going to write it into our policy, and we expect that our director, assistant director, if that's what they choose to do, you carry them out. And if you talk to your director and you say, Director, have you done this? No. Well, why not? We've told you that this is near and dear to our heart. If you have that policy right now, I'll go back to it. You can say, Joe, I want you to have your director do this. And he can tell you, that's nice, but we don't have time, right? But if you're in charge, or you're one of 5 people in charge, you get to move the mountain at that point, right?
And coupling that statement with some other statements that have been made, our system has grown so much over 20 years. The scope of it, the intention of it, it's a logical step.
I would recommend that you put in language such as there are certain standards of continuity of communications equipment, but not necessarily even use
What
the
it
word
is.
radio or anything,
Okay.
because we had a standard that you had to be 800 megahertz radios
Okay.
as a policy that evolved over time because of technology and whatnot. When another county wanted to come in under us, they had VHF radios, and we required that they upgrade before coming in.
Okay.
And did that through the state grants and whatnot. But technology is going to change well beyond the duration of this, and radios may not be what you think they are today. So just set expectations, high-level goals of what we want to raise the level of service, and we want to have continuity of service. We want to make it easy for our friends.
So the 28E is just the creation of and expectations, but not necessarily all the policy.
Yeah.
All right, got it, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I just want to
Good
make sure
question.
it's there.
Yep, that's
Okay.
great.
Okay. So I think what I'm hearing from the Board of Supervisors is that we're open for change, that this new structure seems like it makes sense for our mission of increasing the level of service and growing. So, I mean, I think we've accomplished what we wanted to today. We can dive into the discussion of what the board looks like. If you think we're ready to do that, we can wait another week or two or come back with some plans around that. But I think we've accomplished everything that we wanted to accomplish today in my mind. Are there any other things that anybody wants to talk about?
I have one clarifying question. Is the director of the communications center an employee of the board of supervisors or an employee of this board?
She's an employee of the
The
board.
board, okay, thank you. The way it was being discussed, I had a hard time
Right.
discerning whose employee it was.
Currently, the sheriff will be hiring, but he said he's going to have these committees. also.
I completely understood
Right.
the process. I just when it came to who does that employer report to, I was a little unclear. Thank you.
Now, as you're getting your feet under you, you might enter into a 28E with the county to help administer payroll or all that.
Yeah, certainly there can be a partnership to
But this is a wholly
to
owned
give them
separate.
benefits and
You want
payroll.
me to
This is
explain that
absolutely,
part?
it's just who does that person report to is completely understand.
Yeah, so the way Westcom does it is, West Des Moines is considered the coordinating agency. They take care of the policy, they adopt the policies, similar to what Board of Health and Conservation do with us. They've adopted our policies, even though technically they are not county departments, right? So that's the way that they do it. They take care of the accounting, they take care of professional services like HR, finance, and legal. I think this goes to a question that, I think very good question that Devin raised at our meeting with regard to whether they would be IPERS employees. I think, and I was unsure how they did that, and I think what I figured out is that the dispatchers and the director fall under the employment of the coordinating agency. So if, let's say Warren County is the coordinating agency, they would fall under our employment. But really, if you want to get down to it, the board of directors of the entity would be the one who's going to make all the shots, call the shots on that. That's the way I see it.
Yep.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, do we have enough consensus at this point among the board that we can move the discussion forward with these other entities?
From my perspective,
Yes.
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 So if we can do that, then we'll continue to coordinate with them. Start putting more pen to paper.
Sounds good.
Good enough? Doug, you got anything else? Jen? Got anything?
No, I just think it's, and everybody's mentioned that it's an evolution of the dispatch and how it's going forward. I think Doug did bring up a good question when you asked, so what's the difference from what you had? Well, what it is a sign of changing and going forward. And I'll go back and I'll use another example where you voted no against bringing Motorola in back in 17, and then
I've never
3 years
voted, I
later.
don't have a vote in anything.
Well, I take it back, you didn't because you were on the administrative part. when we voted to have Motorola be the contractor to come in. And Raycom came in and gave their demonstration at the same time. And so then when we did vote 3 years later, everybody voted for Motorola because of change. And Raycom was in on that again. That's just, again, we're going forward and we're going positive.
Okay. Thank you. All right, so we'll move on, if you guys are ready to move on to our next agenda item. Thank you, everybody, for the discussion on dispatch. Ben, thank you. I mean, you have a lot of wisdom and a lot of understanding of this, so thanks for sharing. Okay, so the next item on our agenda is the CenturyLink telephone system discussion. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
Good morning, Matt.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Bye.
Okay, so Matt, you want to give us an update?
The situation with CenturyLink, who is our current phone provider, is they're wanting to renew our contract, even though we are moving to a different phone system. So to give you an overhead view, right now where we're at is we have a signed letter of agency with IMU. IMU is dealing with their upstream provider right now, building out the telephone numbers for the new system, along with our SIP trunks. That's expected to be finished and completed this week. We did have to purchase some additional licenses, a quantity of 50, because of non-Warren County employees that we provide phone systems to, such as in the court facility. The back end is being built out right now. My network administrator, Evan, is losing his hair because of having about 17 Excel spreadsheets open at one time. We're looking at a rollout date on this of mid-September to late September. What CenturyLink is trying to do is they're trying to renew a contract right now. Don and I have spoken at length about this, and I believe that the best thing to do for the county is just to go on a month-to-month basis.
What does that look like? Is that an increase in cost? Can they increase it anytime they want during this time?
Yes, they could. But at the end of the day, we're still going to be saving money, because if we get the new phone system lit up in mid to late September, then everything should work out fine. And right here, if you want to look at it, is our phone book that Evan just completed, which has all of our numbers. So as an example, for the auditor's office, there's what we call a hunt group. The hunt group is a general number that is like a phone tree. But the county auditor would be number 1. So his, as an example, would be 9181. His deputy would be 9182, and then it goes down the line from there. With the county attorney's office, Doug would be 9121, Alex would be 22, Eric would be 23, so on and so forth. So there's actually a logical format to this, and I will submit it to you so you can have a look at what our new phone book's going to look like. So it'll be set out logically.
Oh, I think it's.
Oh,
I think
the
it's
whole
all
thing.
just
It's
one
all
thing.
together.
All right.
It's easy.
Awesome.
Yeah, that is literally fresh off of the printer.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good.
So all our numbers are going to change?
Yes.
Okay. Do you foresee any issues with the public being able to get a hold of us, or, not, I don't have any of our numbers memorized personally, so I look them up every single time anyway. I'm just wondering, are you anticipating any public pushback from changing all our phone numbers?
I do not believe so at this time.
Okay.
Because you're always going to have what we call user confusion. We will make the appropriate changes on our website, and we will notify via the website, here are the contact numbers for the county.
One other quick question. If we have to buy 50 additional licenses to accommodate the state over at our Justice Center, have we asked the state to pay that fee?
I have not, because...
Or can we ask the state to pay that fee? Okay.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I think we have to provide them space, and I think.
And the phone system's part of that?
Part of that
Okay.
is the phone.
That doesn't surprise me. Good, I thought I'd ask the question.
And the thing is the 50 additional licenses came as a surprise. We were able to negotiate that down substantially because it was missed in the original bidding process.
What is the amount?
I've got it down now to less than $1,900 a year.
Oh, great job. Okay.
You're incredible.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Keep negotiating. Love that. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Now, the WebEx thing,
The WebEx thing is rolling out.
yes, I saw that.
Yes.
It was a
And
reminder that we all needed to go in and accept it. It is not spam or something like that.
no, that is not spam.
Right.
And the county attorney's office is using it. I know for a fact that Jamie is using it. She likes the chat features of it so far. And we can now do WebExes. We can have, interactive communications, and you can even have them on your phone if you would so like.
Okay.
So you
So
think this thing's...
The reason I bring that up is because didn't you say also in that same note that the telephone numbers, and I'm trying to get back to Darren's concern here, that the current phone numbers and the new numbers were going to be available over on top of each other for a period of time?
yes, they will.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
We've had IMU basically capture those numbers for a period of about 1 year.
Yeah. So I think that should help transition us.
Yeah, that's good news. What do you need from the Board of Supervisors to... Oh, I'm sorry, Joel, did you have something?
I was just curious.
Please go ahead, please go ahead. What-
If the devices, the actual phones, are those remaining the same?
The devices?
Yeah, the phones.
No, ma'am. I have 230 new telephones sitting down in the server room, locked up in the cage, ready to deploy as soon as we can.
Okay.
So it's just our vendor taking the time to build it out. We can't rush it. If you rush something like this, you greatly increase the chance and opportunity of a mistake. We're going to test it before it becomes operational. Doug, your room kit, we've already been testing.
Okay.
So I think Dawn has some feelings that she would like to express about CenturyLink, so.
Wait.
All right, hold on. I'm going to stop that right here.
Together a formal letter to them saying, thank you so much. We're going in a different direction, and we know we have to stay with them on a month-to-month basis until we're done with them. So that's what we're going to do.
Is there going to be any training or when you roll this system out to our employees? Because
Of
I know
course.
this has a lot of features, and I'd like to understand, just personally, I'd like to understand how to do some of this stuff, and I think training would be a good thing, like a formal training rollout
Yes.
on the features and benefits, and how it can make us more efficient, communicate better, whatever.
Well, one of the great things about this program is, for example, Joe can be on his computer in the sheriff's office, and he can see, because it'll pop up on his screen, who's calling him. And so you can choose to accept it, deny it, go ahead and shift it off to voicemail, along with using the phones.
Are you going to be sending that email back out? Some people may have deleted it before you sent that. It's not a
You're speaking from personal experience?
Yes.
asking for a friend.
Welcome.
Like to be deleted.
I appreciate everybody in the county that deletes phishing emails.
Yes.
So, whenever you suspect something isn't true, check with us. And, as you and I both know what
Mhm.
goes on a regular basis. Yes, I do appreciate you being thorough in deleting suspect things, but we'll have a little talk with Cisco and have them send that back out.
I have to admit, I did it, delete the first one, and then I got your second note that said, no, that's okay, you can take these are good.
No, I'm thankful that you're
Yeah, that
being
one-
vigilant.
That email did bring some red flags up for me as well.
Yeah, the first one I was just like, I'm gonna stay away from this. And then your second one that said, no, it's okay to accept those, okay.
Yeah, I'd already deleted it from the deleted folder by the time.
Well, it's just like yesterday, I received an email that said, you can't look at this email until you click into it and verify your network credentials. Oops, no.
No.
We're not doing that.
Don't put that stuff in an email.
Hey, Matt. BA was over this morning and they were asking about their phones. Are they part of this new group because they're moving to this building?
Yes,
They are, okay, I'll let you know.
yes, they will be.
Okay.
We'll take care of their needs, just let us know what they need from an IT standpoint.
When they, are their phones like our phones, like no matter where we go, the number follows them?
I believe that they are.
Okay.
I'd have to check on that and get back.
Okay, I'll have them put in a help desk ticket then, just to make sure when
Okay.
they get ready to start on. Okay.
And
Thank you.
that, on that same subject, general assistance is included as well, correct?
Oh,
Mhm.
Because general assistance.
Yes.
is coming over. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Will this be a new account through IMU for payment of the bill?
There will be a additional charge from IMU for paying for our set trunks and any long distance charges. And, you know, we can sit down and talk about how to bill out, especially long distance and things like that to different agencies. But first, let's get the phone system in place.
But currently, we don't have a phone system with IMU, so it is a different account number.
It will be a different account number, and I don't know what their billing structure is like. Not yet, and then, you know, we're gonna find out.
The reason I'm asking is that I'm gonna kind of put this in there right now that we've been having some issues with paying our bills on time with IMU and paid some pretty significant late fees in the past, and it all has to do with how we do our billing the end of the month versus when we get approved of claims, okay? And so I'm looking into an electronic form of payment to get this more into an automatic thing so we don't have to rely on an email that somebody got and deleted or forgot to get in here in front of the board to get it approved. So this new account there, I'm gonna need to put into the same style of automatic payment, whether that's gonna go on credit card. I think the worst thing we'd have to do is increase the amount of credit that goes on our credit card so that we can take care of this automatically on that payment, because evidently they don't accept ACH for us on this payment. I'm not sure, but I'm working on it, and just putting that in here as this is also gonna be affected.
Good plan. It's a good plan to automate.
Stop
things.
paying late fees. That's 1% of our bill is a late fee, and it's very significant in this county.
It's
Ridiculous.
It's incredible.
Just for missing it by 1 day, 2 days.
Anything else on CenturyLink?
Something's kind of, it's not CenturyLink per se, but with IT, there's some discussion several months ago about our email addresses changing, going away from .org. We've waited, but now with the phone numbers changing, all of our business cards have our phone numbers, so I'll need to update those, but it costs to do office-wide business cards. It costs a couple $1,000s. So I don't want to do business cards for a phone number in September and then new business cards in October for a new email. Do we have a time frame on that?
No, we do not.
Okay.
Because we ran into some issues with Microsoft.
Okay.
On that, so I would just go ahead and do your business cards as normal.
Right.
And you said the old numbers will continue.
I believe that they're going to continue and overlap for about a year.
So we could continue to run down whatever business cards.
So, yeah, we'll have some time, but that's what I'm saying. I didn't want to have to change both and then, or one and then the other. So.
Yeah.
Okay, we good on that? You good, Matt?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks for being here.
Thank you.
Got 4 more things to go through today. The third thing is a discussion about the temple and the Wonder on Buxton. Hi, Jamie.
So, I think you were able to meet with all three of them? Yes, I did. So, Elodie and I met last week to talk about the temple and the money that the Wonder on Buxton got to resurface the parking lot over at the temple. And last year, when that kind of came about and we had formulated the facilities committee, we kind of talked about maybe putting that on hold or finding another project for them to spend their money on, because we didn't know what the fate of the temple is, which I don't think even the facilities committee short term still knows what that fate is. But Elodie's idea last week was we pulled up the map on Beacon, and I had been under the understanding that our lot stopped at the
Driveway.
yeah, that back driveway there, but it includes this, and now we've got the dumpsters gone, so it's really kind of wasted space back there.
I think what it drew my attention was the removal of the dumpsters presented an opportunity to evaluate the space and perhaps be able to incorporate some green space towards the front of Buxton, which would be really conducive to the Wonder on Buxton project. So,
Were you able to talk to Julie yet about moving the?
no,
Okay.
I did not. I figured that was out of my league.
I don't know if you have, on that map, you can kind of see the white, where she uses it for the motorcycle. When you drive out and actually look, it doesn't look like much space here, but when you actually go out there and look at it, it's quite, I mean, you'll be able to easily park 2 rows of vehicles and have a way in and a way out. And I think that, I didn't talk to Julie either, but I don't think that she would probably have a problem with moving it back there. Or even moving it more a little this way. So what we kind of talked about, if you guys want to look at that, is where I have that penned in line, is tearing out that blacktop and adding green space to that space to make it a little more open on the front. And then the spot in the back where the dumpsters used to be, making that additional parking. I think with what the facilities committee has talked about doing, regardless of what we do with that, making those changes won't really affect that.
It'll also make a more inviting community parking spot during the off times when Julie's not using it, and we all know we need more parking. So having a green space there will create more of a interest to park there and walk through there with the Wonder on Buxton project. So it helps, and it looks so much better when you walk out of this building to see a park-like area, a green space. So it'll help your visitors, it helps the community, it helps, I don't see a downside.
Are you talking about using that whole back lot where the red line is to put a parking lot in there? And then how many, did you do an analysis on how many more spots? Or, I mean, if we take away the front half and add the back half, it looks like you're gonna add parking spots over
It
there.
definitely will add.
It looks like you'd almost double,
Yeah.
Well, that's good.
double what you're taking
And
away.
it's really not being utilized appropriately now as it is, but
No.
The other part of that is along that property line, which we would have to have that lot surveyed. We just have to do the whole lot so that whatever the board decides to do in the future, we have that information. But putting up a privacy fence
absolutely.
Yes,
you know, kind of-
Sure.
For that homeowner.
Yeah, I bet that homeowner would appreciate that. Are there 2 homeowners back there? or
There's
just
3.
3.
Yeah.
So I would be in favor of getting costs associated with putting some parking back there. Like, we can always we can get that going now, or at least look at the cost for that.
Absolutely.
And move, I think any dollars we spent towards parking in this community right now would be welcome dollars on behalf of the public. And
Can I see that?
Yes.
so, like, if you don't mind, Jamie, going out and getting some costs to figure out, like right away, like in the next, as soon as we know the numbers and can get this going, I think it can only benefit.
So the maintenance department has been gathering places that we can get quotes from to resurface the lot here as well. And so I thought when we have them look at that, I would have them look at this too and kind of get us a cost to, I don't know if
Put it
they
together.
give us a good deal, but while they're here,
Yeah.
knock two birds out with one stone. And you guys got what, 20 grand?
Yes, I believe there's 20,000 from the county
So,
towards asphalt.
it's probably gonna cost more than that in the long run,
It's asphalt you're looking at.
to do the asphalt and to tear out the asphalt and, backfill with dirt, you think?
It's gonna be
Yeah.
grading, definitely, yeah.
They'll probably want to go at least 8 inches thick with it.
Gravel or asphalt.
I mean, it just depends on how much money you have to work with, because you could stabilize the base with cement or fly ash, then you got a lot stronger base to put on it.
We're gonna need
There's a lot of options.
I do too.
Especially if we don't know what the temple's gonna do and if there's gonna be construction or not
Yeah,
with machines going
Yeah.
on there, so. Okay.
Isn't there some alley proposal on some work that's gonna happen on that block as well? Didn't they say 2 square blocks around the main square are gonna get utility work done around the alley?
With anything
No,
happening
I think
on
we're too
that
far
end.
away.
Nothing's
Yeah.
gonna happen on that.
I think we're outside that zone.
City.
Good question.
Question for you, on this alley here, is that something we need to ask the city of Indianola to vacate?
well, I need to do a
Because
little
I'm
bit
seeing
more.
that it's listed, or at least it's a driveway there, I don't know if that's because
Yeah.
of the city. And so then the question I would have is, do we need to formally ask the city of Indianola for permission to vacate that, so we can just incorporate it all as one area?
Yeah, I need to do a little bit more research on that and on,
On the side.
this side,
This one, yeah,
yeah,
this
is
one
that,
here.
yeah, like, is that ours, is that city, whose is that before we start?
Because I could imagine that we would need to formally request from the city of Indianola to vacate that area.
Yeah, and you have to talk to neighbors too.
Uh-huh.
Absolutely. Well, yeah, it's a hearing, yeah.
Well, it'd take a permit, to do anything, right? You gotta go through the permitting process
I
with the
would
city of
assume, yeah.
Indianola.
Yeah.
So getting with Charlie might be a pretty good idea on the head of this to see what he sees as.
Because it looks like right now, we're paving part of the alley as part of our parking lot.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And then it kind of stops.
I don't know.
Oh, they just need to know.
Are there any intake structures in there? That's where it's gonna get pricey, probably. If you're planning on paving a big portion of that, they might say you need to control your water and tie it into the storm sewers, and just a thought.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
So it isn't just a little surface
Mhm.
deal, there's
It all depends
other
on the
considerations.
We just wanna put asphalt and tear out the asphalt. Can we do that or not?
I would just be ready for the city to say something like that, because
Very good
back
thought.
when it was initially done, they didn't have those concerns, but now
Okay.
they do, so.
Good idea, thank you.
You're not taking the alley away, though.
Well,
The-
do you
the
have the
one-
map?
Yeah.
Still have to-
No, I don't think you are. I think you
have
could
to have
park
a
your car in
drive.
there.
No, but this one you are,
But we would,
because we would want to incorporate that into as of one big whole.
yeah, so.
We don't know yet what this, we may just pay this
Right.
whole thing. so.
Well,
So it would be part of our,
I think.
like our drive to get in and
So
out.
we basically
So-
already are paving that.
So other than paving it, you're not taking it away.
Right.
Now, you do have 2 alleys that you're dealing with, you know that.
Yeah, get this too, yeah.
Yeah, my guess is we're already technically paving the city of
North,
Indianola
south.
alleys
Mhm.
here.
Mhm.
It's the east-west as well.
Mhm.
Okay.
I got two.
We've paid for this one. Right, don't
Well, I think.
So we'll
Charlie-
reach out to Charlie and Tim and start there and see what they say before we start working on getting bids
And
together.
it does relate to our overall facility strategy on what we're gonna do with that building.
Absolutely.
And to me, it would be nice if we could get to where we're trying to get to from a decision perspective with facilities. Maybe we have that whole lot to build a parking lot. I mean, maybe that's in the best interest of Warren County and Indianola and, you know. I mean, when we start doing this stuff before we have a complete plan, we're kind of opening ourselves to making overall mistakes.
Very good.
It would be really nice. I mean, I think this is an opportunity to, what are we going to do with the admin building? What are we going to do with CICS? And all those related facilities questions. Can we wrap this up in a bow and can we get to a point where we know we have an overall plan and strategy? And that's on me as being a member of the facilities committee. That's on you. That's on Doug. That's on you. In essence, what is our plan? Like, we have a lot of plans and we are doing a good job of trying to narrow it down, but let's just gut it out and get to what is this all going to look like? Is it a separate administration building 5 years from now? We've talked about so much when it comes to facilities that I think we really need to get a plan, get it in front of the Board of Supervisors. It's, you know, just with our wish list, what's the best scenario? And let's start there.
I think going back to a little bit of the public discussion we've had this year on things, while we've had conversations, we've not really put anything down formally to put a stake in the ground saying this is something we're going to do. So
Right.
I would be very much in favor of putting together a regular fund that we set aside. And I would propose $2 million as an example, where we take maybe the remainder of the ARPA funds as well as add to it from our other fund. And then just actually put that aside, because I think the public needs to understand that this is a serious thing. It's not just a conversation that we're having once in a while. I mean, this is something that has been ongoing. And it also would put a marker down from a budgeting standpoint so that anybody looking at it would say, yeah, they're serious. This is going to be happening. And I think there's another aspect of this we need to really consider. It goes to what you were just mentioning there. Let's face it, this building is going to be 100 years old, about 3 years. So why not you take this as an opportunity to talk about how we really are planning to celebrate this facility as our home going forward, and the renovations that are truly necessary to deal with it. To me, this fits right in with that.
It does.
As a bigger plan. So I would almost suggest that we maybe pull together some sort of task force beyond just the facilities committee that brings in a public component. Not that they would necessarily make the decision, but at least to sign off and endorse, yeah, this is something that's special. We need to plan for this 100th year celebration of this facilities. We're updating whatever. And then allow the facilities committee and the board to move forward with the plan. But I think we need to have a public component outside of what we have. Be more an advisory type group that says, yeah, okay, we understand what's going on. Because I think I heard some public members recently say, we didn't know anything about your administration building plans. I was like, okay, let's get on the train here. Let's let them.
Yeah, the point being, we know we have needs,
Yes.
but we don't really have a plan.
Yep.
You know, a real concrete
Yep.
thing that, and bringing the public in to help us develop that plan is a great idea.
Well, and I think that this is a very nice thing. I know Ellie and I have talked about this as well. And I really have to applaud the city of Indianola for their vision to look at extending the square beyond the square. How do you, really this Buxton Avenue area is an extension of the square. So how does this take the square out from the square as well? just going in a different direction than what the city hall proposals are that the city of Indianola is proposing. So I think this potentially, we could be a significant part of this connection here in Warren County, where you connect these old places together. And let's face it, Simpson College has been here since 1860. And so we basically are potentially tying these things. This is a great opportunity.
Yeah, it is.
I think that we could leave a bit of a legacy for the next generation here as we go forward, because I think we're getting our act together.
Crystal, how did they formulate the committee for the Justice Center? Were you part of that?
Yeah, I was. I was just going to suggest not going that way, but going, whenever we had our talk, I know Melissa from the Hometown Pride. There's so many organizations already. Why don't we have the heads or members of, a representative from each of one of those that would be
Bringing a voice.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is their town. I know they're going to want to have say and input.
Yes.
So I would just suggest that would be, if that's okay with the board.
Well, I think it definitely needs to be, this is a county thing. Yes, we need to make sure we've got the town voices, but I think we need to make sure it's a broader representation of the county as a whole, because this is something that we're a part of.
I think that both those ideas are good,
Yeah. I wouldn't say an overly large group, but I'd say more of an advisory group to say, okay, folks, this is where the county is. These are our needs. We need to restructure the building physically to do these things. How can we incorporate this into a bigger aspect? And by the way, we have a timeline. We want this done by here.
I would advise I'd suggest that you perhaps consider your own preservation commission as for the historic component, and then as the parks.
Yeah, it's a nice thought.
Parks, so that we have the green space represented. Merchants is another group.
Downtown, I thought of them.
So, rural, so.
Yeah.
I can tell the cities when I go to talk to them, so that would be great.
Thank you.
The only concern I have those are, that in the perfect world, that is the perfect thing to do. But I just don't want to get bogged down in forming a committee that displaces action.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly. And that's why I say make it advisory only and make the timeline very specific. Folks, this is what we're needing to do. Here's the timeline within which we are going to have. This is not one of those things we're going to talk to death.
Yeah, right. Get some ideas, put them on paper, get it going.
We need to look at this as also the marketing aspect, to get it out into the public that this is what we're doing.
Yes,
so that they
right.
understand,
Yes.
and it's not this, oh, you're doing this to the building?
Yeah. Yeah.
So just so you guys know, we met with the structural engineer and the architect last week about some other stuff, and then it kind of bled over into this project. We're working with Steve Gray, and I need to get him, which I found today, moving stuff, the plans for this building.
You found the plans for this building?
Yeah.
You're kidding me?
No.
Like architectural drawings for this building?
Yeah. We found lots of stuff today. I've been looking for the add-on stuff for here, and we found it in a storage room. Yeah. So
Where'd you find them?
Actually, they were right outside Kirk's office. And then there was a bunch in that storage room back in the board room.
It's going to save us a lot of money and time having those drawings. I'm not kidding.
Oh, yeah.
So after meeting with all of the department heads and kind of talking through things, he kind of took what we were looking for initially. It's not a final of anything. It's just something that he can put together so that we can start here and then build out from there. And we talked to him about helping us with the bidding process and kind of where that would land and how it would go. And he suggested starting the bidding process in January with them to potentially start in April. Now, this doesn't have to happen, but have them start in April because he said January is a good time to get the inside work bid on and done so that they're able to keep their crews moving. And then his estimate was 6 months, I think he said.
6 months.
6 months, yeah.
Wow.
So,
So
you
would
know,
that include renovations for the new supervisor rooms and as well as renovations of downstairs?
that would only be the auditorium space.
That just the auditorium?
Then it's kind of a trickle effect. So then we move the offices in there and then we go in back.
That makes sense, yeah.
The other thing that we have coming today is a bid on replacement windows for this building. So far we have one coming in. I do have a second one coming. We have a bid coming on cleaning the exterior of this building. They came to talk about tuck pointing, but they felt that it was more dirty than needing anything else. So we're waiting on that as well. So you're right, you know, this building is gonna be needing a lot of TLC, and if we have 3 years to try and make that all happen, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it was a good meeting. And I think we're gonna have a lot of decisions coming here, you know, as we develop a concept and a plan. I think it's gonna take some time. And the public input on that, you know, how we connect things is really a big component of it. But I do want to get moving on this. Like,
Absolutely.
I absolutely don't
Absolutely.
think we have any time to mess around because it would be nice to have this building renovated phase one and figure out how we're going to fund that, which I don't see as a big deal.
No, I'm not concerned about the funding at this point, as long as we set aside the funds. I think we need to dedicate that. I think that's an effort that we as a board need to put a stake in the ground and say, hey, this is what.
The thing I think we're going to run into, and Crystal pointed this out a few months ago, is $1 million doesn't go very far.
That's
when
why I
you're
said.
talking about renovating.
Did you hear my comment? I said two.
So, we don't really know what the total cost of phase one is going to be. It could be.
That's a good start.
I mean, if it's 6 months construction, it tells me the number's going to be up, you know, up there.
Yeah.
So.
I think the other part of it is the architect that we're working with and us having more control over the spending aspect of it, you know where I'm getting.
We're a little more experienced.
Yeah.
Yes.
And a little more frugal than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think that, how can I say this? I better not say it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, I've got something to say real quick, if you don't mind.
Sure.
So I was talking with Jamie just a little bit to spring this on her, but this phase one, you're talking about the gymnasium downstairs, I assume, right? And I've just kind of been in this role for a tiny little bit of time. I understand that this belongs in the auditor's office, right? So it got farmed out and it's a committee now that's taking care of this issue. And I have no idea what it is that you guys are up to and what you've done. And I'm fantastic that you did that. Thank you for taking that on because it's a big, big challenge. The one thing that I got to looking at that gym when I first came here, I said, what a beautiful place, what a beautiful piece of history this is. There must be all these people that go to high school that still live around here, that went to high school here, that did their play on that stage and all this stuff. Wow, when somebody gave me a tour through there, I was just blown away. And my wife's cousin came in recently and she said, this was the guidance counselor. Your office was the guidance counselor's office, you know. I remember being in there and she told me, we went through the gym. I was talking with Marty a while back about this, but also I've been around to talk with other people in the building to gain some kind of consensus about the idea of having a cafeteria down there. This cafeteria that we have currently, we bring in a band every Wednesday. I don't know if you've seen them or not, but they go down there and play.
We hear them.
Yeah, and all that stuff, and it's just a fantastic way for the community to gather in here. I don't know the history of things, but I know that you guys were doing meals out of here not too long ago before the building was done over there, and now things have switched over there. I've talked with the treasurers, I've talked with the recorders, I've talked with the zoning, I've talked with other people to say, would you guys eat here if we had this cafeteria down there and it was working, and they've all said, that's a great idea. I don't know where you're at with your architect and your planning and your zoning thing, but in talking with Marty, we'd like to suggest that you leave a 30-foot area right there for our community people to continue to come in and play their band, and that we have that cafeteria kitchen down there filled up with the things that people in this building can enjoy, especially the new people that are coming in as well, the supervisors, whatever, everybody. I feel like that we could make that something that would continue to be of value and preserve a little portion of including the floor that's down there and the basketball area that's 30 feet and the kitchen area. So I mean, I'm throwing it out there because I have discussed it with other people, and I do think that there's some support for this idea, but I got no idea what I know she was saying storage this morning is what you were talking about doing in there. I'd like to see if we couldn't reconsider that storage area, move it somewhere else, this way, that way, and leave that space for.
When we get our, we won't have build drawings, but we'll have schematics of, general layout. That's when we would need to have these discussions, because we did talk about having a big multi-purpose room back in that area for, a big meeting room, a big training room, a big multi-use room that may be able, maybe that's it to bring the community into, but let's get it laid out. And Steve's charged with the directive to start mapping this stuff out. But we're gonna have a ton of discussions, and I think it's another opportunity to bring the public in, see what the thoughts are, and we probably need to incorporate that element. But we definitely appreciate that idea, and it's something we're toying with, and trying to figure out how to get the best of both worlds that way. But I mean, honestly, I don't know if we have plans to have a kitchen in there. I don't know, like a full-use kitchen to do congregate meals or.
Yeah, you kind of
We
have
need a
one there.
full-use kitchen.
There is one there already, that's the thing.
Yeah, I mean,
There.
we have a tremendous kitchen over at the Justice Center, so supplementing.
Caterers kitchen the most.
But, I mean, but I'm not saying that's a no or anything, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that the kitchen hasn't been part of the discussion initially. But it can be, that I have no dog in this fight whatsoever, so we can do whatever the public wants to do, that would be my direction.
One of the other things that I'm just gonna throw out there, one of the strengths that I do bring to this role that I'm in is that I can read drawings and I can move things, and I know what HVAC means.
Well, it was your idea to say,
I mean,
hey,
he comes from the construction
if you're gonna
industry.
build, one of the things that you said, hey, how are you gonna access the upstairs? Because we're talking about having storage upstairs and platforms. How are you gonna access that from the second floor? Well, we don't know yet, but we probably wanna be able to do that. So, your background in that question has sparked already a question in design on how this is gonna
Right.
eventually be built.
Access from the second floor.
Access from the second floor, how are we gonna do that? Well, Steve Gray's charged with that right now. We need to access this from the second floor, how are we gonna do it? And he hasn't been able to figure it out as yet, but, he might have to go back in through another, we don't know. We gotta lay it out, and then we gotta sit down with a drawing and go through what everybody wants and do the best we can with it. But we can't really talk about it. I found I can't really talk about it intelligently until I can see a drawing. Because I can't really
Plan view.
do the
elevation.
space. How many offices can we put into that area? I have no idea if it's 10 or 25. I really don't. But we're getting going, and I'd recommend speed and action.
Yep.
And green space.
No, green space first, then speed and action. But Elodie, we really appreciate it, and I think you can really help us get the community involved in this. Like, when I think of how do we do that, I think of you, honestly. Like, if that's Lauren Ditzler, she's come in here with great ideas and thoughts, and maybe that's Leslie Hill from the Downtown Merchants, maybe that's you, maybe that's our fire chief over here. I don't know, but having that diversity of a group to come in and give us guidance, please help us with that. Well, I mean, we just don't have the resources to go out and start recruiting people. I can see where this will fall, that great idea, but how we can execute it, we may need you.
Jamie will keep me. I mean,
Yeah.
she already knows I'll do whatever she says.
She's got you swindled too, huh?
Yeah. She's got me swindled.
Thank you.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Okay, next item on our agenda is secondary roads facility discussion.
Did you guys get a chance to review the letter I sent you from
Can you summarize it for
I'm
us?
sorry.
Jesse, you have a copy. It's an issue we brought up back in November, December. We met with the board. I know Mark was in attendance, even though he wasn't on the board yet. We had issues with the fire protection plan on this project. Timing, it wasn't sent to the fire marshal, or it should have been with Chief Chia all along, but it was sent to the state fire marshal after the contract had been let. So there wasn't the review done. Shive said they were confident in the design. State fire marshal disagreed. We had Chief Chia review it too. The plan does not meet fire code. So they gave us these options. Some very expensive, some still expensive, but less expensive. The cheapest option would be to divide the space. And I gave you kind of a drawing of it too. The cheapest option was to build a wall down column 11. So it'd been right, build a wall right down there to divide the space, and then to finish this wall out to make them 3-hour fire rated walls.
Okay, so we'll hear.
Yeah, that was not necessarily the most favorable option when you design a building to have open space and be functional like that. The mid-range option was a rolling fire curtain wall. So when an alarm would go off, the 3-hour curtain would roll down and divide the space. The best option for everybody would be the sprinkler system. And we met with Chia, we met with Warren Water. Everybody but Warren Water agrees that we can tap into their 12-inch main in front of our building and has enough capacity.
I don't know if we have the pressure.
We had our architects, engineers look at it. They think there's enough pressure. Warren Water says no, and a worst case scenario, we don't. And their worst case scenario was if everybody on the line is filling up their swimming pools and doing laundry and taking a shower and every head in our building is going off, then they'll drop below their threshold. Not really a realistic worst case scenario, but they said no nonetheless. So
Who said no?
Warren Water.
Yeah. What do you think, Chief?
It'd be like winning the lottery if that was gonna happen. If you were gonna drop below that percentage of what they're requiring. And that probability would be highly unlikely that would occur, that everybody's filling their pools, flushing their toilets, and that would drop them below. That 12-inch main there's capacity there.
They have complete control over who
Yes,
ties
they
in.
do. Yes, they do.
So they've already, we've had numerous meetings with them and they've already said no.
They can put an exemption in and allow it if they want.
No.
Have we asked them for an exemption?
We've had, I think, 6 different meetings with them, and every time they just come back and say no. I think they just don't want to have a line hooked to, don't want to start providing fire services to people.
Is it a board?
There is a board. We've been talking to Stan Rippinger. It's not to say that we still couldn't put a sprinkler system in. There's another option on here, which is the most expensive of all of them, is to do a sprinkler system with our own pump and tank, which theoretically in the future could serve the other buildings that we'd build out there. The reason I'm coming to you again, I know we've talked about this before, and maybe we can try going through and persuading their board. I don't know. I feel like it's, I mean.
And they have, he brought up, they have had an exemption, at least one he's brought up, and that was the place in Bevington. The come and goes. because they needed a sprinkler
I think
system.
I think he said they made him put up a tank, didn't they?
I'm not sure, I don't remember what it was, but
That's one they specifically said, yeah, we made them put up a tank, and it was either that one or was it the one down by New Virginia? But yeah. We could still, that's a route, after all the meetings I've been through with them, I feel like we're just hitting our head against the wall, trying to get them to change, unless you guys have any connections with the Warren Water District.
Where's the building at?
South of town on Nevada Street,
It's just north of Aquabi.
northeast.
Also, you're talking about the maintenance building there?
Yeah, the new
area.
maintenance building.
Okay.
Yeah. Maintenance building.
I'm bringing it back up again because David had settled on, let's do this mid-range option of a dividing curtain wall that comes down.
That's option number 1 here, right?
That's option number 3, which that number 375 to 450 was lowered quite a bit because they had some assumptions in there, what we wanted to do with like coil doors and stuff, and we changed it to lower that number down. But now the number is getting back up to what you see there because they're having issues finding suppliers for it. And
Can I ask you a question, Tim?
yes,
So you have a second building already designed,
yeah,
right? And so while you may have to spend $375 to $450 on this building, you would potentially have to do the same or more on the next building.
those buildings I think would probably just have the brick and mortar walls in between.
But that
It
reduces
would should be,
functionality.
yes,
of the building.
200,000 per wall or whatever, it still adds cost, all of those.
So if you built the tank with the diesel pump, then that can serve both buildings?
if you make it big enough and it's, the capacity's there, yes.
Okay. So then,
That would be in the
while
design.
the cost may be a lot up front, it may be cheaper in the long run.
Yeah.
Would that be fair?
Yeah.
I think so too.
The issue there is funding. I just kind of want some guidance. You know, you guys could come to me and say, do the cheapest option, build a brick wall down the middle. It's your choice. It's all extra funding that should have been dealt with prior to letting, but that's in the past. So these are really the 3 options.
Which, Tim, let me interrupt you. On option number 1, to build a wall, is that all the orange lines in this drawing? Or is it just one of, what wall?
Those orange lines in the drawing are fire rated walls.
Okay.
Column 11 would have to go a wall and then extending this one to be a complete wall.
Oh, okay.
And that would be options, that'd be option 2 would be building a brick and mortar wall on column 11 and extending column 14 out all the way, so they'd be,
Okay.
you'd have smaller spaces for fire rate. You gotta be under 5,000 square feet.
I don't like that at all.
I didn't like that either. That's why we went to the
Fire curtain.
fire curtain, but now that's nearing the cost of, should we just bite the bullet and go for a sprinkler system and plan for the future in that?
Why isn't this the engineer's problem? Why isn't this the guy?
The architect.
Yeah, I mean the architect, the company listed on this.
Yes.
Why isn't that their problem? And I'll tell you why, because, well, I guess I won't.
Thank you.
Because we signed a contract with them.
Yeah.
That's not,
Yeah, but here's the thing,
I know.
you understand.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I know where you're
You guys know exactly what
Oh,
it is.
yeah, I understand.
The issue with this really is the fire review should have been done prior to letting. This is still a cost that we were gonna incur, whether, you know, if we knew about this before letting, we might have taken out the,
No, but didn't they say that we didn't have an issue with this?
Right.
That's what I remember. Like, you don't have to worry about that cost because you meet all the requirements and you're fine.
yeah.
Well,
In the building.
you know, that's not necessarily the case, as we know right now. So,
Chief, do you sign off on the size of the tank, or is this something that we go to the state fire marshal? If we go and build our own tank with pump,
We can.
you do?
Great.
We can. Because, well, I'll run it through our professional engineer, who is a fire protection engineer.
So you would tell us what we need,
Yes.
and we would work with you.
And in
to
fact,
get-
you may have from Lund I don't know if he, did
I
he
have-
get into any of the design?
Not on sprinkler.
Okay, and that's an option, but,
So will you look at this for us then? Is that what we're talking about?
well, we have,
I think it's to the.
we just
point
got brought in late.
I want some
You need to make a
guidance.
decision.
I want some guidance. Do we,
I'm not gonna spend $250,000 to $300,000 on a wall that doesn't do anything functionally for us except.
yeah,
I mean, I like the idea of putting in a system that works
Yes.
for all our buildings
Yes.
long-term. and making
insurance
sure-
likes it, fire chiefs like it, everybody likes,
water
they're
company.
just, it's just the most expensive portion of it, and that's,
What are you all in on this project right now? Do you, on the phase one that we've approved and that we've okayed, are we,
6.2 million for the secondary roads facility,
Yes.
somewhere in that.
okay, so you're talking about making this a 6 point, if we do the right thing here and put $700,000 into this fire.
Close to 7 million.
What?
I'm sorry.
What? 7 million, so
Close to
6.2 goes to 7.
Yeah, and we'd included $300,000 contingency in our budget.
This is the stuff?
This
I mean,
is not.
I mean, this is what we talked about last year, you know, we're doing our budget. You got 600, 700, we got $1 million things coming at us all the time. And we didn't budget for this.
Right.
And so,
Can you pull this if you do go, whichever route you go,
Can we use
you're gonna have
real
to
money?
spend some
Yes, we
money.
can.
Good.
Because
Can
this
you
is a
pull
rule
this
building.
Oh, good, well, let's leave
A
it.
different fund.
yeah.
Rule,
Well,
Oh, you're good with that?
yeah.
yeah, let's just use the rural services fund.
Okay. Well, that's the way I'd be okay with it.
We've been told we need to spend that money, so let's spend it.
Hey, you got the, I would say, if I'm saying something wrong, let me know, but you got the green light to, you know, get this right. We're not gonna build,
So I'm gonna tell them to stop looking into the fire curtain and start designing the sprinkler system and.
even if it's a storage tank, figure out where it's gonna go, what it's gonna look like, bring it back to the board, make sure that it's functional, aesthetically pleasing, all that stuff, like however it has to look.
Okay, while we're talking about the shop site, where is the Morton building in this process right now? The extra storage for emergency management, 911, attorneys,
I met
sheriff?
with Doug and Don out there and
Okay.
we've been talking about it. I don't think there's been a decision made. The way, I know they talked about tying it to the second phase at one point. I think if they want that building sooner rather than later, it should probably just be its own standalone
Okay.
in the back corner and they can build it whenever they want.
Okay.
And if that plan changes, we can talk about it again. But if they want to get going on it tomorrow, if they put it in the back corner, we can get a road to it and they'll have fiber that can put cameras out there. It'll be out of our way. We looked at it, minor grading, not massive grading.
Are you sure? Because that kind of slopes.
We drove
down.
clear back to the corner and it's doable for sure. It's
Okay.
just,
What is this in regards to?
It's a storage building for sheriff.
Oh, yeah, we've been
attorney,
talking about that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Emergency management. and
Have we
then-
got bids on that building yet?
So that we can get things out of the.
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
totally get it. I
Yeah.
totally understand.
We would need to
Yes.
go get new bids
Yes,
now, but
because this was.
I think, as Tim said, we drove back in there 2 weeks ago, maybe, and
Did we put?
he found a good spot for us to
Towards
go.
this?
I think it serves both of our needs. You can work on it whenever you want and you'll never be in our way. And we can make you a safe road back in there where you don't have to worry about our guys.
So that's where Troy's trailer would go and
All of Troy's trailers.
the
would
auditor
go.
stuff.
Sheriff.
If there's auditor stuff,
911,
like
and
even
emergency management.
why we own voting machines, I don't know, but voting machines could go in there.
Yes. We
Like
took some of this files out of the basement of the courthouse. Or-
And the annex, and the temple.
I like it. You're good with that? Mark, you're good with that?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
So we'll go get some bids and bring it back to you. But I think it's a good,
Okay.
we got a good spot for it.
And so this fire will also serve that building? as
I would
well?
think so. I
That's
think
good.
that's a good
Yeah.
part of what you're doing.
what we need. Okay.
Yeah.
300, okay, so we already have 300,000 set aside for that building. I know it's not nearly enough, but that's a good start.
That'd be pretty close.
Okay.
Well, it's a big building maintenance project.
Well, we already got 300 grand ARPA money that we assigned.
Well,
Yep.
but we've spent 238,000. So this is for the Prohl satellite
But
shop.
that's a
Oh, no, no,
different
no,
sub-
that's a different one. Yeah, this would be, I worked with Dawn on it in the
It was an
beginning.
attorney's request, right?
Yeah.
Not secondary roads.
It was attorneys, but it was for sheriff, attorney.
I think she was just looking at our ARPA.
Yeah, I was
Yes.
looking at yours.
I will give them guidance on where to go for the sprinkler system. And before any change order is approved, it'll come to you for your guys' approval, so you guys know the final numbers and everything, so.
Do you think it's worth,
Oh, we did have a meeting, last week, where I had the attorneys kind of come in and be part of it. We had concerns about them moving or not moving on the project. There's been a lot of delays and issues with subcontractors and a lot of finger pointing and excuses and everything that goes along with delays. I think I like to be an optimist. I think the meeting went all right. They seem to be moving a little longer, a little quicker the last few weeks. I'm gonna keep my eye on and make sure that they keep progressing and don't fall back into the same habits that they were. There's an insurance issue with they installed liner on the roof, but they did it almost the entire building. It's basically just that tarp that they put up, and it was in place for about 3 weeks before they started roofing over it, which is not standard practice for builders. They would
We had a few
they would
rains in the
put they would
meantime.
put a liner up in one bay, roof over it, and then moving because it's kind of risky to put up a tarp out the top of the building. We had a storm, not a major storm. It ripped most of that liner down to shreds. So they were trying to call it an act of God. We discussed that and haven't got. We have builder's risk. I gave them the information. We're not thinking it's an insurable issue because that was more neglect instead of an act of God, but that's for the insurance company to decide. I think we've moved past that, so I'm gonna keep Doug in the loop on everything as we go, and if we run into another issue, I'll let you guys know, but.
when's the completion date right now targeted?
Right at the end of October.
Okay, so was there anything in the contract originally that stated what the completion date was gonna be?
Yes, it was April.
April 28th, I believe.
Were there any penalty clauses?
Nope.
There's no penalty clauses there.
There are none.
Yeah, okay.
That's why before we were to ever move forward to phase 2, I'd want to get this done and then learn all the lessons we need to learn and not repeat any of that.
Yeah.
Because there's and just like a lot of the headaches you guys probably ran into with the
Exactly.
courthouse and things, you know, not to go down that road again.
Well, it's funny how we did go down that road again.
I know.
Yeah, it's funny, not funny.
It's not funny. It's probably the most frustrating thing that I've been associated with.
Yep, me too.
You too, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, if you're seeing it from our perspective, it's like, what? Burn me once, shame on you.
And I'm
Burn
assuming
me
it's
twice.
because of who is involved
That's
here.
what I think so.
Right.
It's just a shame. But anyways, that's
seems
not
like
on you.
it's-
That's not any kind of negativity
Yeah,
towards our engineering group at all.
Just trying to work through all the hiccups that you guys dealt with us after I talked to Doug. We had some not so funny laughs about some of the same issues going on.
It seems like
I'm
we're
so
in the,
glad.
yeah. So anyway, I think we got a good plan going forward. We definitely appreciate all your work and your conscientiousness around driving this project home. Doug, thank you for your involvement. I think you two together are a great team. I'm glad. I think that's a good decision that you made, bringing in our attorney to have these meetings and understand the contractual legalities that we're dealing with. And
Tim's doing a good job with them. being on top of them.
Yes.
It'll get done.
Okay, anything else on that one? So move forward with the right way to do that. Work with Chia as much as you can.
I
Did you find any?
Dawn, I don't have it on my spreadsheet, but maybe I missed it. I'm emailing her to see it.
Okay, all right. I thought it was around
Good to always
200,
get to see you.
150, 200.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
That-
All right, thank you, Chief Tia, thank you.
I'm gonna take just a quick step out.
Okay, we're gonna take a 5-minute break. We got, oh wait, that's the wrong one.
The fund designation for administrative building updates and fund balance policy discussion.
Oh, fund panel. I wonder when we're gonna have that.
I gotta take a quick break too.
Okay. Oh, it's noon already? Great. So how's everything going in the Warren County world? Warren County Attorney's Office world?
It's good.
Yeah?
Are we still live?
I hope,
No, I put it on pause.
but I don't know if I have any video going. Do we have any video going? Do we have any video going?
I don't think so.
All good. Busy.
Busy.
Yeah, we got a trial going right now.
Colby told me that, Colby Edel from
Yeah.
basketball told me that, Joe Strong, I think, started to come after one day. Were you there that day? They work together. They're
Yeah.
both attorneys. They're supposed to be reasonable, professional, and they're about brawling on a basketball court. It doesn't
They
say
weren't
much.
brawling.
Oh, they
were
didn't?
having a discussion. A disagreement.
Oh, that, how does that happen in playing basketball?
We had the best games yesterday. There were only 9 of us there.
That
And
is the best.
it was just calm, you know, we just had fun playing
Yeah.
ball.
Yeah,
It was good.
yeah.
Of course, 4-on-4 is the right size for that court, in my mind.
I do too.
You know,
It's too, it just gets too, like,
it's compact.
compacted
You
in.
know, because what is it, about 75% of a real court
Probably.
in length?
Oh, we're not too far off our schedule.
It just seems like down low, there's just a lot of, it's packed in. I don't know if
Yeah.
the lane is, the lane's probably.
I think everything side to side
Yeah.
is appropriate, but I
Yeah.
think that the long way is shortened.
Okay.
Did I get a copy of your memo with the 20 things? Going back a couple hours ago.
Yes.
In my mind, this is how it should work. Public meetings should be short. And then our work session should be longer, like working
Oh,
out the
absolutely.
details.
Oh, yeah, this is exactly what it should be.
This is where government works.
Yes,
And that's
exactly.
where just the basic decision is
Yes,
made.
yeah.
That's why I love these meetings.
We're still in our meeting then, so we just
Yep.
continue? Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and get started again. So, we've talked about the secondary roads facility. The next item is to discuss the fund designations for the administration building updates.
So Mark and I have kind of discussed this. Really, all we need to do in order, if you do want to designate some of the general fund, we can put it in a separate fund from the general, so it doesn't show that giant pool of just undesignated funds. So it shows that we just have this portion set aside to do. And that amount is up to you. All we need to do is approve it via resolution. And then I can go and create the fund and we could put the amount that you decide in there.
What's the current balance of our general fund?
Let me pull it up. $5.7 million.
So what does the board feel comfortable putting in an administration?
How much, what is the ARPA balance right now?
The ARPA balance?
Unspent, undesignated. And we should have a little bit more than we had a few days ago because we redesignated some money around.
Well, were we able to put the entire Greenfield Township into the rural basic
Yes,
account?
yes.
We were able to do that?
Yes, we did 100% the other day.
Beautiful.
So, and I spoke to the state auditor's office and they said that they would be, that both the traffic signal that we had discussed, whether to do it from ARPA and rural would be fine coming from rural. And then the remainder of the Greenfield Plaza payments would also be fine coming from rural.
And then the original, does that include the original amount that was going to be put to the, because we talked about actually going back and actually paying that original amount that had been.
And he said, as far as moving ARPA from ARPA to rural, you can do that assuming they are allowable rural expenses. However, you would need to track those expenses at the claim level and be able to support exactly which expenses they are moving.
Okay.
And then this would basically be a correction.
Great.
So then with those changes added to what is the undesignated balance, what would be our potential ARPA that's available?
So we have spent so far on Greenfield Plaza $20,000.
Oh, not much yet.
So that
They're just getting started.
I would
Okay.
say for that amount, we just leave it so that we don't have the extra scrutiny of moving funds from ARPA to rural and this crossing fiscal years.
Okay.
Yeah, that is true.
That makes sense.
And then if I take out the rest of the 200.
Because that was 220, wasn't it? Okay. And then we added 190, as I recall. For that, for the rest of the project. I'm trying to remember the numbers now.
When the bid-
Because they came and asked for extra money here the other day, and I thought it was another 190.
Yep, and I never added that in since the rural discussion.
Yep.
Yeah,
So if we take that out.
because we designated that to be coming from the rural services fund.
So we have about 870,
Okay.
it looks like.
Here's what I would suggest, that we take 1.2 million of our general fund balance and set aside, and then take the remainder of the ARPA and make that the $2 million admin building renovation parking lot change. That would be that's what I would suggest we do. I know we're not making motions here today, but that's where I would be willing to do.
I think that's a great idea.
Can you use that money for a building this old right here?
Absolutely.
Not a problem.
No.
Federal, is that federal money?
Yeah, it's federal money and it's pretty, I mean, there's.
You can use it almost for
If
anything.
it's on the
Low structure.
state historical registry, you can still use ARPA money to do that?
We've used our money to put in fences,
Oh, yeah.
do all kinds of infrastructure
Yeah.
things, and the
No
barrier's
problem.
low.
Okay.
But, I mean, all of these things get thoroughly reviewed by Dawn when we get an application. So what you're talking about is basically the board of supervisors filling out an application for $800,000 to do administration building.
Yeah.
And we'll run that through our process. You know, legal will look at it, look at the restrictions and make sure we
Basically,
got our
then we set it aside, and then the public is aware that we are. And then that also deals with the question, the greater question, which was get the money designated and spend it, start spending.
Right.
So, because we're gonna have architectural fees and other things like that are gonna be
Oh,
coming
of
up pretty
course.
fast. So obviously, we use the ARPA money first, and then we use our fund balance second.
There you go.
Okay, so we got some good
So
ideas.
so with that, then we are done with ARPA.
Yeah,
ARPA would be 100% designated.
yep.
I would be
Well,
very happy with
designated,
that.
And that
Because
money's
then we give us $2 million, we address the issue from the public perspective, they're saying, well, why didn't you tell us what you're doing? Well, okay, we're there at that point now. And to your point, this last year, 1 million isn't enough. We are probably gonna be 2 million, hopefully we'll take care of hope.
Yeah.
But it's probably gonna be a little short, who knows? But we'll deal with that as we get down the road.
And we can make those decisions as we understand our costs.
But
What
I'd
do we
like to,
want?
I would be very much in favor of just getting this, if we can set that up and go through the normal resolution process.
And I think with the application, we just put remainder of ARPA funds, that way we're not stuck to
Yeah,
exact.
yeah, 800 and some change, whatever it is.
Yeah, and I think we're gonna find we're gonna have to do some reconciliation with ARPA as projects don't happen or money doesn't get spent. I mean, we're gonna have to be pretty diligent about understanding that and making sure that money does get spent one way or another before the end of 2018.
I would suggest that whatever remainders are there, we just put into this fund. And we just use that towards this because then we can use our general fund balance.
Let's put that in our
Secondary.
resolution, that any remaining ARPA funds will go towards.
And ARPA's in its own fund, so we would probably still spend it out of the ARPA fund, but on the building things. And then the 1.2 million would go into that fund that we create. So we'll just, instead of moving from ARPA to that fund, we'll just spend the rest of ARPA from the ARPA fund and then start spending.
Great, but I think we need to designate that fund and get that out there so people know, and from an accounting perspective, it's clear that that's set aside there.
And then when we do our reporting, it'll show, on certain parts of our reports, it'll show that we've got this fund balance. It won't look like there's just all this money sitting there because it'll be in its own separate.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah, that's good.
that'll help us from many,
Yeah.
many perspectives.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, great.
And I think we're pretty much in agreement, I'm hearing, talking about on the last project, so then we'll use a rural fund to basically pay for the water tower project and all that sort of stuff. I think it's the right thing to do.
What's our fund balance in the rural basic? Outside of the shop?
3.59 million.
And that's outside the shop and everything?
That's,
Does that include the
What is that?
1.2 that we're gonna be spending down this year, using it towards ongoing expense?
that is just the current exact.
So then you
fund
have to
balance.
subtract 1.2 from that, and now we're gonna
Why
add
did
to
we
it the
subtract-
cost of the water
Why
project.
do we subtract 1.2 from that?
Well, because that's what we're gonna basically be used to subsidize our operations,
Spending down.
because isn't that what we said we needed to do, because we weren't gonna use the new revenue from the tax?
What
Yeah.
we can't collect?
That's correct.
Okay.
So you've gotta reduce that by
That's
the
not
1.2, right?
What you're considering.
Yeah, I'm just
That's
looking
real
at the
dollars,
exact-
Yeah.
like what I think
Yeah.
What we have.
that's the real dollars in the fund balance
In the
right
fund
now.
balance right now.
But we're gonna spend down, what you're saying is that we're gonna spend that down this year because we didn't get the
Yeah,
tax
so basically
increase.
what we've discussed here and what has already been committed because of the budgetary situation in the hearing, we're gonna spend 2 million of that.
Very good.
Okay.
So the balance will be just slightly over $1 million. I think if we look
Which
forward
is-
1 year from
Which is
now.
very hard because you don't know landslide or.
Right.
You just don't know.
Well, we still have 1.2 coming out of general fund, so 4.5. I think we're gonna be fine. Yeah, I mean, we're gonna be safe for the next couple of years. It's really not, honestly, it's in 2 years. I really am concerned.
Well, but let's face it, with what I've seen happen in terms of growth in the county, our tax base is growing. So We have to remember that.
Valuations are
that
going.
we have a bigger pie.
Mhm.
Not like some counties that are stuck with a certain size pie. Our pie
And
is
you know,
growing.
and the truth and the reality is of everything we're doing, this is not stuff we want. This is stuff we need. This building needs to be updated. We need to have the proper water system at our engineering department. We need that. We can't cut corners. So I'm good with it. I'm
The
good
one
with it.
concern that is out there, it was shared with me last night when I was talking with the mayor of Norwalk. They are going to have a special workshop on the impact of the legislation from this last legislative session, what that means to local municipalities.
Good.
And the county. And I can't remember the exact date, but it's coming up on Thursday night sometime pretty soon. I'll try to remind you all, so if you want to be aware of that, join them.
I'd love to hear what they say about that.
Yeah.
I think how
Well, you could easily, just attend as a public person.
Okay, great. Okay, next item. Are you guys good with that item then for now?
Absolutely.
Megan, you good with that?
Great.
Okay, last item is fund balance policy discussion.
So I printed off a few copies just to get some information, just from looking from what the Department of Management, the feedback we got from them. Copy two.
Thank you.
So basically, I went to the GFOA website. They're who I'm going to be doing the certification process through this fiscal year that we budgeted for. They actually, so the first is just their recommended steps to developing a financial policy. But actually on the second page of this, they have a reserve policy template that we could customize and use. But if you look at those bullet points in the middle, that's, I think, kind of the policy we're looking for, where we want to
We'd have this, we wouldn't have.
designate a percentage to help get us out of kind of avoid situations like we had with the appeal in the future.
I like this. This
And
is
then
one.
the final page, I just highlighted Story County. I was able to locate part of their policies, so I kind of highlighted in there. Their goal is to maintain a fund balance of approximately 25% of general fund annual expenditures.
Great.
So this is kind of stuff for you to look at if we want to do a fund balance policy, and we even kind of have a template to go off of. And then just figuring out, and I looked at a few fund balance policies, and I think several of them did that approximately 25% of general fund annual expenditures.
Do we have a sheet similar to this for Warren County that has a heading like this?
We don't.
So this is why we really need to put
Yeah.
something like this together. Okay, got it.
So let me ask you.
I wasn't sure if we just needed the one paragraph or if we needed the whole page.
We would need the whole
Policy.
Okay.
So what is 25% of our general fund annual expenditure right now?
I'd have to look at our budget.
Because I'm thinking that our fund balances really aren't out of whack based on that percentage.
No, they're quickly dwindling, so.
I mean,
We were at 30 or 40% on the general fund, I think it was.
I know
46 back in March.
I know one of my spreadsheets tells me all of those percentages of the fund balance.
you can look at it later, Megan, if you want.
I just have to
but
remember which
I'd really
one.
like the board to have feedback on what percentage are we now? Where do our current fund balances sit relative to our overall general fund expenditure? And I bet it's less than 25% would be my guess.
I'd like it to be a little bit more.
You'd
If
like
it
to
could
see
be.
more?
I would.
Well, yeah, I mean, when we have $1 million land
Exactly.
things and $700,000 construction project things, I mean, $5 million, that's good.
Yeah.
But it can be eaten up pretty quickly, the way things work in county government.
Yep.
So I totally agree with you that,
Well, when you're in a county that's constantly growing as we are, I think 25% is not adequate, just isn't. And if we have that in a policy, we're not gonna get dinged again.
yeah, let's do it. I really love this idea.
This is great.
And do you need Doug, Doug, can you help with this policy? Or should you be looking at this policy legally, or do you think it's just standard boilerplate stuff?
I'll review whatever she gets, if she wants me to.
Okay. So you got Doug's help and you got our help with whatever you need, but I say get it going as fast as you can.
Okay.
And then bring it back, and we'll talk about percentages and the details around whatever, but just get a template put together on what you want to see, and then we'll plug in the numbers, run it by Doug, and we'll be ready to go.
Okay.
Maybe in the end here, I'm kind of thinking out loud, or I shouldn't do this, but maybe the hearing we went through was a really good thing, because it did force us to have to confront some of those types
The
of
thing
issues.
is, when you make mistakes, you get better if you're
You
doing
do,
it right. You know?
and it's not that we were really doing anything wrong, it's just that, okay, it's a different way of looking at it.
Yep.
And in many ways, I think maybe in the end, we'll come back and we'll have a little bit.
I think we'll be ready next year.
I think we'll be ready, no question about it.
And that's really is a benefit, because we're getting better and we're getting more knowledgeable about this stuff, because it's not easy to understand.
Well, and I have no doubt in the subsequent year, we will have to look at either growth of revenue sources naturally that are happening, or else we will have to look at adjustments, depending on what happens.
No, I actually appreciate the process.
Yeah.
Because like Doug has said multiple times, it happened exactly how it was supposed to.
Mhm.
It really did. It didn't go our way, but,
Well,
and I learned a ton after that.
but even the petitioner didn't get everything they wanted either, you know?
Right.
So it was okay, we all learned from it.
If you had it to do all over again. Okay, so we're good on that agenda item then, Megan?
Yep.
Got everything you need?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, so is there any other discussion from the board on any of these agenda items? Anything else? It's been a long meeting, so I'll go ahead and make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, please.
McIntyre. Aye. Snow.
Aye.
Peter.
Aye. Meeting is adjourned. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
So sorry, it was 38%.